Every single time we plan a mission, whether it's a simple daily mission or a complex project, we go through these same 6 steps. We're going to go through them in detail in a second. I want you to notice that they're broken down into phases. The first phase is just to define the problem. What's our mission objective? What do we really want to accomplish? What does this support in our overarching strategic objective? Next, let's align the team on the mission environment. Let's talk about the threats. Let's talk about our resources. Who's done this in the past? Let's talk about your lessons learned. And then finally, after we have aligned on the mission environment, let's start assigning responsibilities, clear courses of action to accomplish our objective. Step number 1, determine that mission objective. Mission objective is clear, it's measurable, it either happened or it didn't, and it's achievable. Meaning it's not a stretch goal, it's something that we literally believe we can accomplish, so it creates a sense of urgency around getting this done. And then last, it's aligned, and this is critical. You need to explain to your teams what this is for. Why are we doing this? What's the overarching strategic objective that we're pursuing that makes this particular mission objective so important? The thing I want to ask the team immediately after determining the mission objective, it's going to kind of sound strange. Why are we going to fail? What's going to stop us from succeeding? What are the threats out there that stand in my way? Because I want to understand those threats now. If I can come up with the threats, then I can mitigate them during the planning process. Some of the threats your team might come up with are going to be complacency, the indifference of the other team members. Hey, I've got 20 other things to do. You're going to have to convince me that this is one of the 20 that actually should get done. We don't know if we have the right leadership support. We don't have the right critical personnel on the team. We don't communicate very well. We've got silos. It's really hard. I was told 2 days ago, sales and marketing really don't work well together, and that's okay with me. We like to work in our separate silos. Wrong answer. You guys have to work together. Let's figure out a way to create alignment in your plans. And we have competing priorities as well. Next, we want to know, what are the resources? What are those things that are available right now to achieve the mission, or they're readily accessible? What can you count on having access to? So the people that you're going to have to rely on. The individuals that, if we're going to get this mission done, I'm really going to have some great conversations with fill in the blank. What's the equipment? What's the meeting that already takes place that you can leverage to make sure that this mission occurs, to make sure that this mission's execution rhythm gets established? Hey, let's bring some customers in on the conversation and allow them to be a resource for us. Where are the opportunities for success going to come from? Next, I want to know my lessons learned. I want to know who's done this in the past, and we're going to get this from lessons learned database, from the debriefs we've already conducted, just from experience. If you don't do debriefs yet, don't worry. When you get to this point, just say, who's done this in the room? Somebody raise your hand if you've ever taken on a mission just like this. And then when the hands get raised, you say, all right, only you get to answer. I want to hear from your perspective. What do we need to do to be successful? What do we need to avoid the train wreck? Next, we're going to ask a really important question. Go or no go? Are we committed to this mission or not? Let's look at where we're asking this question. We know our mission objective. We know what we need to accomplish. We know what's going to stop us in the form of threats, and those threats are real. They could stop us. We know what resources we need to consume, and each of those resources has an opportunity cost. We could use that for something else. And then finally, we know the lessons learned as well. So we've mapped out the mission environment. We have a clear mutual understanding of where we're going and what we need to accomplish. So you need to ask the team at this point, is the juice worth the squeeze? Do we really want to continue pursuing this? Is this something that we care enough about? Is this going to move the needle on the overarching strategic objectives? Because once we leave this step, we're moving on to creating the action plan, and we're committing resources after this point. And I want your buy-in, and I want your commitment, and even more than that, I'm going to give you the option to opt out at this point. Tell me you're a no-go. Tell me why you want to change or completely erase this mission. And I'll tell you, about 10% of the time, when we get to this step, we'll adjust the mission objective. We'll move it around a little bit, and teams will say, this is a little too aggressive for the mission objective. Let's change the time, or let's change the KPI and tone it down a bit. Because once we pass this step, the train's left the station. Once we pass that step, it's now time to develop your course of action. This is what you and I wanted to do right off the bat. This is where we say who does what by when. And this gets done very quickly by teams, because look what we've already accomplished. You already mapped out the mission environment. You know that you got to match up your resources against your threats, that you got to do whatever it takes to accomplish your mission objective. You're going to incorporate your lessons learned. So these courses of action pretty much write themselves. That's why it's very intentional that we leave this step closer to the end of the process where we can make informed decisions about it. Now we've got our plan. You ready to go bet your lives on it? Yeah, I'm not either, and that's why we bring in the red team. The red team are members of our group that weren't part of the planning process. We bring them into the room. Since we've come up with this plan so quickly, we tell them, hey, here's the plan. I'm going to brief you on it, but I want you to tear the plan apart. Tell me how it's going to fail. What am I missing here? And you listen to what the red team has to say. You get some great insights from them. Hey, use red team members from across the world. Use your customer as a red team member and come up with some insights as to how to make your plan better. Listen to what they have to say and then capture the things you hadn't thought of and put them into your plan. The last step is to plan for contingencies. What if? What are we going to do if a highly impactful event occurs, but it's low likelihood? How are we going to handle that scenario? Those are the 6 steps to mission planning. Before we listen to our Q&A with an ace who just went through this process, I'm going to give you a couple of tips that we've learned over the past 20 years of teaching organizations in the business world how to accomplish this. First, you got to make sure you got the right team in the room. You got to make sure you got your right key stakeholders, because remember, you're building buy-in and alignment. And if you have 19 of the 20 people that need to be there, well, guess what? You don't have the alignment to execute this mission. You need to have that last person in the room. So you need to plan for who you're going to bring and who's going to be in that session. Strive to conduct these sessions in person. You're not going to hear me say that very often. I know you're globally dispersed. Your team is all across the world. You never see each other. You see each other on WebEx and that's it. I get it. But this is the one time where if you can afford to, bring everybody together for this planning session. You want that buy-in. You want to see that body language. You want to see when somebody sits back in their chairs and says they're committed, but they're really not. And you want to make sure that you're actually building alignment towards this plan. The upfront cost you're putting in right now will pay dividends in the alignment and the execution phase that's going to follow it. Identify your red team up front. Think hard about this. Who do you want to be on the red team? Who's the expert in Ireland that you'd like to tap into? Who's the expert in India? Let's get them on the phone and have them see our plan. It's going to take 20 or 30 minutes for them to go through a red teaming session. Just use that short amount of time to tighten up your plan and make it fantastic. If you bring a customer in, they're going to get their buy-in. They're going to be more excited about your plan, and you're going to get insights that you never thought of before. This is a big one, and this is one you're not going to do, but I'm going to challenge you to do it. Create your high-definition destination and your draft mission objective first. So I said it earlier, but a high-definition destination is our vision for the future, what we're all excited about. Don't just say, you know, what mission do we work on right now? Hey, what are you guys working on? What project should we use for this? You got to align it to something bigger. Don't just start with a small goal. Talk about the big, huge thing that you're trying to accomplish, and then back into what that implies for a mission objective today, and create the draft mission objective. The team members will think this is the easiest part. All ACEs that we work with say, we already know our mission objective. Don't worry, Thor, we got that figured out. You don't. I promise you, I've never sat through a mission planning session where the objective that the ACE walked in with was the same as the one that we walked out with. So the team's going to edit it. It's going to be wrong. Put some thought into creating a draft mission objective with an aligning high-definition destination. Kick off the session with an explanation from the champion. One of the most important things you can do is show why this mission is important. The champion is the strategic leader. We're about to kick off a mission next week, and we've asked the president of the company to join us so that he can say, this is why this mission needs to take place. I know you got 20 other things to do. This is why this one is so important. I'm endorsing it. I'm telling you this is what I want you to put your time and effort behind, and you're going to create the alignment and the motivation towards it by just doing that. The longest your planning session will last is 6 hours. I know that seems like a lot of time, but I'm telling you, even for an international apparel rollout for a huge Fortune 100 company, we did an international apparel rollout. It took less than 6 hours to make that happen for that company, and they said in the past it took days longer. So if you have a smaller group, it may take 30 minutes to do this. When I plan with team members right now, it takes me a car ride. So if I'm driving to a client, it can be a 15-minute car ride for us to make sure that we've gone through all the 6 steps to mission planning. It scales. But do plan with your team to take the requisite amount of time, the upfront cost that you're building in there, so that you can reap the benefits and see the dividends that'll pay out at the end of the mission. Those are the tips for your planning session. Now, without further ado, we are going to hear from somebody who actually put this into place. We're going to hear from an ACE, a very accomplished individual. His name is Mark Passkey. He's the VP of Sales for a tech company. He's a leader of hundreds of people on sales team members with different functional roles across the United States, and he's responsible for more than $1 billion worth of annual sales revenue. Very technical product, incredible company. They do great things, but a lot of complexity and a lot of challenge aligning the teams to be effective. And we just got done completing planning sessions for 3 missions with his North American sales teams last week. Mark, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
Having me.
Got you loud and clear. All right,
Great.
so Mark, thanks again for joining us on the call for the Q&A. Here are the questions I've got for you. First of all, can you tell us a little bit about your role within your organization, Mark?
Sure. You know, you've got on the slide there, responsible for the eastern half of the United States for field sales operations team, and responsible for a little over $1 billion in revenue for our company.
That's awesome. Now, can you tell me how your teams applied the flawless execution methodology recently?
Yeah, sure. We started off with a debrief of Q2. We thought it'd be important to take a look back, and we had a good, productive conversation and identified both some reasons for success and also, obviously, some areas for improvement and places that we had some inefficiencies and missteps. As we learned in working with you, there's no perfect mission at the end of the day. So we talked about some of the root causes, documented some of the lessons learned, and we're looking for a way to make sure that we avoided some of those mistakes and missteps that we made.
Awesome. So now I'm trusting that you didn't just treat this like a history lesson, that you didn't just create the lessons learned and walk away with that sense, you know, that warm fuzzy that now we know what happened in the past. How did you apply those lessons learned to the future to change behavior?
Yeah, absolutely. I think in the past, kind of a broader lesson learned was we've always had great insights into our business. We have a very strong team, lots of great skills and capabilities, and we often spend time taking a look at doing a review and documenting lessons learned. Where we seem to fall short on a consistent basis was, do we have a great action plan for going forward? Do we really have a disciplined approach to execution that our entire team is bought into? And so ultimately for us, the Flex planning methodology came in as a great common execution vehicle for us, and we're rotating our team around that and seeing some early good results.
Fantastic. Well, like we heard earlier, vision without action is daydreaming, it's just hallucinating. So what has your team done to kickstart the execution phase? You have the aligned plan. Are you moving into execution?
Yeah, we are. We had our first mission briefs this morning, which you were a part of, and I think, first of all, jumping into action right away and leading that from the front, and not leaving this up to being a good idea, but actually putting it into motion, and then committing to the process. And that's, I think, 2 steps. One is being familiar with it and getting education from your team, yourself, as well as some self-enablement, but also just an overall commitment, you know, stemming from a senior leadership standpoint, with expectations cascading down through the organization. So mission briefs are off the ground, and we're moving into execution phase.
That's exciting. I know that you're already progressing towards those missions. We wish you the best of luck, and we're excited to continue supporting your teams as they maneuver through the execution phase. Thanks for joining us, Mark. I'm going to open it up to the rest of the crowd now for questions. So if you got a question either for myself or for Mark, our expert ace, on how we've applied this, now is the time to get into the chat box. I know we've already built some questions that have come in already, so I'll start with those. But for the rest of you, you can begin typing those questions into the chat box right now. So question number 1 is, have you seen this planning process improve plan execution? Absolutely. Absolutely I have. In other words, without this planning process, I believe that most plans are doomed to fail. Without the cohesion, without the alignment, the buy-in, the accountability, then if you have mission success, it's usually just due to 1 or 2 people who are saying, I'll just do it. I know we don't have the entire team on board. I know we don't have the alignment and the clear roles and responsibilities, because we didn't pay the upfront cost to do the planning, and I'm just going to go out there and make it happen by myself. That's inefficient. That creates burnout. That creates not so happy employees. We need to have plans to create alignment and accountability for the entire team. When you want to accomplish big, lofty, audacious goals, you need the entire team behind it. And if you're one of those groups who feels like, well, we accomplished quite a bit without doing this whole planning thing, Thor. I'd push back and say, think about how much more you could accomplish. Right now, you're doing stuff with individuals. Think about what you could do with teams if you were to use the process. Next up, someone said, I'm trying to build buy-in for this process. If I only implemented one of your steps or tips, which do you think is the most critical? This is like asking which one of your kids is your favorite. My daughter, by the way, just kidding. I like to say that each one of these steps is like an organ inside of a living organism. You really can't remove one without getting all the benefits of the rest of it. But if you had to hold my feet to the fire and say, what would I recommend you start implementing first? Really, it comes down to the debrief. If you haven't seen our previous session on debriefing, it's available. Kat, if you would send it out in the chat box, you can share the link, because we've done previous webinar sessions on debriefing. And it's incredibly effective, and it's something that corporate America in particular is terrible at. We've asked 3 million people over the course of the last 20 years how well they plan, brief, execute, and debrief. On a scale of 1 to 10, they answer debriefing at about a 3.5, meaning they're terrible at debriefing. So when you hear that, don't say, we're in good company. You should be saying, wow, there's so much more meat on the bone, so much other things we could accomplish if we were to debrief. And that study, there's another study I quoted, not today, but in the previous session, that shows that you can get 40% improvement from your teams just by conducting a debrief. That means 40% greater chance of success at the next iteration by conducting a short debrief. So if you had to do just one as a debrief, then I'd quickly follow that up with planning, and then don't forget to brief, and then make sure you're good at the execution. So I'm going to say all 4 of them. Next up, is there something I can do just for my team? Is this something I can do? So we get this question a lot too. What you're really saying, if I'm reading between the lines, is I can't really count on the rest of the organization to do it. So is it worthwhile? Is it worth my team to create the success for my little group? Heck yeah, you got the secret. Now you know how to take your team to the next level, and the rest of the company doesn't. So I would take my team and say, hey, we've got a great thing going on here. We're going to share it with whoever wants to use it, because we're that type of team and we transfer lessons learned. But if they don't use it, more power to us. We're going to take it to the next level. And I've seen that happen. We're working with a large organization right now where we have pockets of success. And guess what's happened with the aces that are leading those pockets of success? Promotions, recognized for leadership opportunities. They're getting the attention, while the other groups who had not adopted it are struggling. And guess what they're doing now? They're starting to adopt a lot of the methodology. So expect success. Expect to be able to create some great things with your team, but then also expect some copycats to start falling behind the way, which is what we want anyway. We want the whole team to benefit from this. That was all the questions I had here. So we've got any tips or insights or watch out for teams that are not located in the same place. My team's not together in the same location until we are in the execution phase. Great question. So we get this all the time. You're saying, hey, we're remotely dispersed. I'm a global team. I've got some of my team in China, some of them are in India, some of them are in Africa, another group in Europe. How do we get everybody aligned as a group? And my response to that is the most critical time to have them in the same room, like I said earlier, is the planning phase. If you do nothing else, get them together during that planning phase to build a buy-in. And remember, if you do an 8-week mission with us, that's 1 day out of 8 weeks where everyone's together. I don't care if they're together during the briefing. I don't care if they're together during the execution. And there's specific ways we got to mitigate the fact that they're not together, but we can mitigate it and we can work around it. It's a lot tougher to mitigate the fact that you don't have people in the planning room. And I'll give you the 30-second version of how you mitigate it, because it's really tough. But if you just absolutely can't get them together for the planning phase, then what you're going to have to do is conduct the planning session and then go one by one with each of those individuals and say, here's the plan. I know you weren't a part of it. I know I didn't get to get your individual insights. I know that we need them, so you tell me, what is this plan missing? And that's when you're going to have to individually go build the buy-in and the commitment from each one of those people. You can see where that takes a lot more time. So once again, this is my last pitch. Make sure you get everybody in there for the planning session if possible. Next up, how long does it typically take for folks to get into a good cadence in working through these planning sessions? So the short answer is it depends. If you have Afterburner along the way, it's that day. Because we're going to set the rules, we're going to establish the norms for that meeting, and they're going to go right into line. We did a briefing session this morning and with Mark's team, and we did some things that were a little bit out of their, their cultural comfort zone, but I'm allowed to do that because I'm an outside source coming in, and I create the rules for the team, and they allow me to do that. So when you bring an outside facilitator like Afterburner, things will happen very, very quickly. And the challenge will be if you're doing this without us, you can absolutely still do it. You just have to start to build in some more of that buy-in and get a couple of muscle memory reps underneath your belt before you're good at it as well. Next step. Is it possible to be successful even though you have 1 or 2 team members that refuse to buy in? Yeah, I'll say yes, you can always create accountability. You can create compliance, and this process is perfect at that. There's a mission we supported last year where the legal team that was there were 2 legal team members, and they just were not bought in this. This was a business unit mission. They really didn't care that much about it. They had other things they were focused on, but they were told they had to be a part of this. And there were a couple of times in the beginning of the mission where they tried to derail it. And you could tell they were just inventing new threats that they were trying to stop this mission from succeeding. But we were able to mitigate that through our process, and we are able to create compliance and accountability from those team members just by having this planning process. When your name's on a sheet of paper and all the other items before you took place, well, it's pretty compelling that you need to actually get your job done at that point. But I don't like doing it that way. I want excited engagement. I talked about it earlier. Action without vision is a nightmare, and for that legal team, it's probably a nightmare to not have the vision alignment that they could have had there. And so I want to build that buy-in, and if you can continue to have the discussion and go long-term enough, I would challenge that any group can build buy-in. Even with that legal team, we could have sat them down and said, now how would this benefit you in the future? Let's go 3 years down the road. Why would this mission start to march us down a path for something successful that you'd be excited about? Next up, will this process complement a company that is moving to a Lean Six Sigma system? Great question. We get this one all the time. You're saying, I use Scrum, I use Lean Six Sigma, I use all these other processes. Look, they're fantastic. Six Sigma and Lean share a lot of concepts with us. Lean is build, measure, learn. We're plan, brief, execute, debrief. The challenge, though, the thing I think that Flex adds that they don't have, we have the operational experiential foundation. I've lived this, folks. I've spent 20 years keeping people alive on elite military teams using this methodology. It's not just something I read about in a book. So I can tell you how to conduct a debrief for your learn phase. If you're doing build, measure, learn with Lean, then I can tell you how you use an effective debrief and our 6 steps of debriefing with stealth debrief to be more effective in that conversation. If you're doing Six Sigma and you're trying to reduce the variations and increase quality for your company, then we can help you to facilitate the dialogue that yields the right plan to make that happen. So in our planning phase, as you're trying to create 6 standard deviations between the existing deviants and the quality that you want to have, we can help you to find the insights through the facilitative techniques that we use. We're extremely complementary to your existing processes, or like other companies have done, we can be the actual process of record for the entire organization. Next up, question for Mark Passkey. So Mark, did you get any pushback from your team about using the methodology?
We didn't actually. I think the team had an innate hunger for a common process we could follow. We had other areas that we had already implemented, common vernacular around our sales efforts, a common process in engaging with our customers. So this was kind of a natural extension of creating commonality around a cross-functional and geographically dispersed team. So I think we had the advantage of an underlying desire for more common practices, but I think the concern is this going to be flavor of the month? Is this going to be something that we stay dedicated to for more than 1 quarter? And so the follow-through has become the focus to make sure that we get the value.
That's exactly right, Mark. And Mark and I had specific conversations about this. I said, don't let this just end on a planning high. Don't let this end where everybody feels great and we reached across the aisle and marketing for the first time understands where sales is coming from and we're all aligned. Let's not have this kumbaya moment end it all. Let's have action and sustainability on the back end. And he's done a fantastic job, to his credit, of not only creating that inspired alignment, which is the fun part, but also committing the team to the disciplined execution on the back end. And that question goes into the next one for you, Mark, and you may have answered part of this already, but they said, are you going to continue using the methodology after the 3 missions complete? What challenges do you see in moving forward with Flex?
A couple challenges that I think may be out there. One is, as we reach deeper into the organization to support our field-based missions, are they going to be able to speak our us and support the missions as we get more and more people on board? So our anecdote to that was to bring in leadership representing those various functional groups with the hopes that, not having to have reliant upon, spending a couple of days together every time to plan a mission, that this will become a standard operating procedure for the company. So I think the concern was, again, how standard is this really going to be? And then really where our thoughts are wandering now is we can already see the other missions we're going to need to run. So how do we create a sustainable cycle of mission planning once we get familiar and really start to develop some expertise in the entire process? So we've got some learning to do there, but I think the benefits will be very self-evident, and so the desire to continue the learning and execution will be there.
Yeah, and if you're reading between the lines of what Mark said, there's excitement already around where else they can apply Flex, and he wants to create it as a new normal. The last thing we want to do is just create more meetings for your teams. We don't want your team to say, oh, we got to go to the debrief, or I got a briefing meeting. I want that to be your mindset. I know we've won over a company, we have them thinking the right way. When you see a mistake get made and somebody says, hey, save that for the debrief, write that down so that we don't miss it, where it's a cultural way of thinking where you're always looking backwards, you're always trying to find ways in a nameless, rankless, without pointed fingers and getting mad at each other, have a conversation about how we do this better the next time. Everybody wants to be on that team. So it builds excitement. Mark's already put me in contact with different people within his company. We've already started doing work with them since last week because it's contagious. This new passion for working together as a group is something that everybody wants to be a part of. Next up, if you're starting a new small company with plan to scale, how do you recommend getting started? So this one is a little bit out of the bounds of the lesson we had today, but I'm going to say that creating your high definition destination is the first thing you want to do. This is a bit, we didn't talk about this because we talked a lot about tactical objectives that we're pursuing. This is more strategic. In other words, if I were sitting down with you as you're starting your new company, I'd say, what does your company look like in 3 years? You tell me in exquisite detail what's your revenue, how many people work for you, what's the culture of your organization, how do you hire new people, what's the functional breakdown, how many salespeople, how many marketing people, how many business unit individuals do you have in that organization? And you're saying, whoa, Thor, you're blowing my mind. I have no idea. Things are going to change between here and then. Well, I agree, but you at least have to have a common blueprint for what you're building before you just go out there and start building things. Let's develop the North Star together first and all align on how big the company is going to be in the long term so that we can back that into this critical steps that we need to take right now. Because otherwise, we've got 1,000 things to do, and it's difficult to decide which one of those to do first. If I begin with the end in mind, it's a lot easier to back into, well, what are the first few things I need to tackle right now? Next up, we got about 3 minutes left. How do you choose who will be in the room, and how many people is too many? Great question. And, I love that you said how many people is too many instead of too few, because the too many really is the challenge. We all would love to think that adding another person to the team would make things better. That is the opposite of the case. The perfect team size is about 5 to 9 people. So behavioral scientists have proven beyond a shadow of a doubt with normal interaction between the normal number of introverts and extroverts, 5 to 9 people is about what works. Any more than 9 and you're competing for airtime, competing to talk, any less than 5 and you're just capacity constrained. But here's the challenge. I want you to bring everybody to that planning session that's going to have a role in execution. Because remember, we're building the alignment. We're building the commitment in that planning session. So I don't just need it from 5 to 9 people. Very often I need it from about 30 people. So you bring them into the room, and we didn't have time to talk about this today, but there are very specific techniques that I'll use to facilitate the dialogue. Because now with 30 people in the room, I can't just say, hey, talk freely, raise your hands, or I'll talk at once, even worse, because the extroverts will dominate, the introverts have checked out, everybody's looking at their phone under the table, and we need to have a way to facilitate that dialogue in a constructive way. We use a process called team storming that very easily gets rid of groupthink, and it levels the playing field between extroverts and introverts. I don't have time to go into that technique here, but we can talk offline about how you apply that. So bring as many people as you need that are key stakeholders, and then think about how you as the facilitator, as ACE, or bring in Afterburner, to have that discussion on how you're going to team storm that dialogue. All right, one more question and then we're done. How do you establish an execution rhythm? Probably the best question I've gotten all day, at least from the perspective of where I see missions fail. I've seen more incredible plans just gather dust on a shelf. I've seen more teams create alignment without ever actually doing something about it, because they have this mindset that we finally have this plan. We've never had this aligned plan, so the rest of it will be easy. Someone said to me last year, Thor, we're great at execution. And by the way, on that same survey where we asked them how well they plan, brief, execute, debrief, 3 million people said on a scale of 1 to 10, we executed an 8. So everybody's above average when it comes to executing. What you're really telling me is you're good at putting out fires. You're good at going out there and reactively handling a situation. No one wants to live there. Let's go to a place where we're building something intentionally and moving forward. So here's how you create your execution rhythm. You immediately go into a brief. I talked to Mark at the beginning of the week and I said, Mark, you've got great plans. The one thing that's going to stop you right now, and it's already starting to wane, is the excitement around your mission. You need to carry that momentum right away into a briefing. And you got to hold your team's feet to the fire because they feel like, hey, I just planned, I'm done. Wrong answer. You hadn't even started the race yet. You showed up to race day with the right sneakers and the right clothes and ready to go and practice, but the race hasn't even begun. The briefing has to kick it off. And that's the way you start your execution rhythm, and it's a great segue into our next session, because the next time we get together, we're going to talk about how do I begin and maintain an execution rhythm when everything else is changing around me, when we're already task saturated and focused on other things. All right, I'm going to leave you the thought from the great General Eisenhower: plans are nothing, planning is everything. That's a general. You saying plans are nothing? Are you kidding me? That's a 4-star general from the military that's saying that plans are nothing. I agree with him 100%. Just having that plan that gathers dust on your shelf means nothing. Planning, creating the buy-in, creating the alignment, reaching across the aisle, that's what the process is all about. That's what you can't afford not to do. Plans are nothing. Everybody's got a plan. Planning, building that plan together is everything. Ladies and gentlemen, we are Afterburner. I am Thor. We do these sessions every couple of weeks. We have these sessions also available to watch from previous opportunities. And more importantly, bring us along for the ride. We love to hear your questions. We get a ton of questions every time we conclude these sessions. And we love answering them and partnering with you to make your mission successful. If you need to really inject success in there, remember our mission success guarantee. If you bring Afterburner along, you build your high definition destination with us. You have us plan out your mission. We carry it through from the execution to the debrief phase. We guarantee you that you will have success in that mission. Bring us along for the ride. Thanks for your time, ladies and gentlemen. We'll see you next time. Thanks especially to Mark Passkey for joining us. We'll see you later.